new federal government begins in the spring of 1789, one challenge is just to get the thing going and just to have it all work. The second challenge was debt. America was crushed under a load of debt from the war.
The man charged with putting the nation's accounts in order was Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton.
Every man ought to be supposed a knave, and to have no other end in all his actions but private interest. By this interest we must govern him, and by means of it, make him cooperate to public good.
He was a fast study, he was a quick mind, and he had that kind of determination, that kind of ambition that we now think of in sports stars, that willingness to practice a shot 1,000,000 times till you get it right.
Hamilton was uniquely qualified among the founding fathers for this position. He was the only one to be born into an urban commercial milieu. All the rest were basically landed fortunes. Even the Adamses were farmers. And Hamilton simply grew up in a counting house. I mean, by the time he was 13, he was actually running a counting house in St. Croix, and he understood money. The United States was an economic basket case. I mean, it was the world's largest banana republic, only without any bananas. And, I mean, we had this enormous debt left over from the Revolution, both internal and external, which we couldn't pay.
Hamilton was interested in increasing the revolutionary debt, and he wanted to assume the revolutionary debts of the states. Hamilton, a brilliant governmental architect, if there ever was, saw that he could turn that debt into an asset by what is called funding the debt, by getting the taxation that would pay the interest rates on a new set of bonds. This would give the government a great deal of control over credit. They could change the interest rates, they could retire the debt, and in this way they could influence the flow of credit, which of course is the mother's milk of commerce.
Jefferson and Madison both were smart enough to understand where Hamilton was going, what he wanted, and they realized, among other things, that it favored the mercantile class. They were planters. Jefferson's hostility to urban life was quite strong, and his fear of social chaos, that is, workers and free blacks and all not under control. And so I think that he saw that Hamilton's plan would lead to a dominant northeastern world, but also a kind of America he didn't want to see.
In order to secure congressional approval for the debt assumption component of his plan, Hamilton had to forge a compromise with Jefferson and Madison.
They wanted the nation's capital not in New York, where it was sitting, but right near Virginia, so they could make sure that they could see that nothing evil and conspiratorial was going on. Well, Hamilton didn't care where the capital was, so he made a trade-off. He said, I'll give you the national capital and 2 players to be named in a later draft, and you'll give me funding and assumption. And they made the trade.
The part of Hamilton's plan that generated the most controversy was his crusade for a national bank that would issue a uniform currency and regulate state banks. Jefferson and Madison insisted that incorporating a national bank violated the Constitution.
Jefferson's argument has come to be known as strict construction, and he said that only those powers specifically given to the federal government were the only powers that the federal government could exercise, and the Constitution nowhere gives it the power to establish a bank, and therefore the bank is unconstitutional. Hamilton argued exactly the other way around. He argued what has become to be known as the doctrine of implied powers. And he said that if the Constitution gives the federal government the power to do something, it implies the giving of the power to do it in the most efficient and effective way.
President Washington was persuaded by Hamilton, and in 1791 signed a bill establishing the Bank of the United States for a first term of 20 years.
At that moment, Jefferson recognizes that he's lost Washington's support. And it's at that juncture that he begins to think of an alternative way to articulate his vision of what America, society, and politics should be like. And he goes, you might say, outside. He goes outside the circle of office holders and begins to talk to leaders in the states. He and Madison take a famous botanical trip up the Hudson. But I don't think they saw very many flowers, but they saw an awful lot of New York politicians as they went up the state. In other words, Jefferson begins to build a political party.